We have a fantastic panel. So I'd love for each of you just enter yourself and what you do so everyone knows context, and then we'll get into it.
All right. Yes. John Pasmore. I'm the founder and CEO of Latimer.ai. We created what some people call the Black GPT. It's a large language model trained with additional Black history culture.
Woo!
Zekeera Belton here, Vice President and Cultural Strategist at the Collage Group. And what we focus on is centering cultural intelligence, so helping brands unleash the power of cultural intelligence to really drive brand growth. So we really go deep in really understanding the insights, the cultural nuance across Black, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQ+, women, diverse segments.
Hey everybody, Danisha Lomax, EVP, Head of Client Inclusivity and Impact at Digitas, and what that means is I get to partner with our clients and brands to really make sure they are centering voices that are typically unheard and uncentered in our industry, and really making sure they have a systematic way of pushing culture forward in their business.
Hey everyone, my name is Larry Adams. I'm the CEO of XStereotype. We are an AI-powered platform that detects bias in content and helps eliminate stereotypes and content development. And I thank you so much, Amy, and everyone. I'm really honored to be on this panel.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's get into it. To me, the topic of diverse data is so important, and to me, this is also very much a growth story, and how we are really mining for and understanding growth audiences and authentically connecting with them. So we can't be here without talking about Gen AI and machine learning, so I think that's our first hot topic we're gonna get into. So my first question for Larry is, how can generative AI and machine learning be used to uncover and integrate cultural insights into advertising strategies?
Well, it's a great question. I think everyone is like, okay, how do I use generative AI to make my life easier and move faster and just win awards everywhere? I think what we need to take a step back and understand is the underpinning of all that sort of generative output is data, and it's pulling from sources that are known. And so one of the things that's important, and especially when thinking about how to get the most out of generative AI, is it's prompting what you're asking, but also what the data source is. And it's really hard to uncover what is actually powering a lot of these systems. So asking the question and digging into the provenance of what is actually driving that. So to answer the question directly, yes, it can, but it has to be a step change in how we've been operating from a data collection perspective, from a data aggregation perspective. And what AI is here to do is to make connections faster for us. But what we need to do is make sure those connection points are actually accurately representing our consciousness and where we want to be. And so, not a plug for XStereotype, but that's exactly what we do every day, is think about ways in which we can create more and brighter signals around the human experience and our diversity experience, and bring that into a consumable manner by AI and start to influence that generative output.
We can't talk about generative AI without also talking about, to your point, on the risks attached with it. And how do you do that in terms of, especially as we're talking about being authentic and assuring that we're making this as real as possible at speed using these tools? So talk a little bit about the framework you use. I think it's really important. All of our clients ask us about the risk reward.
Well, I think, to be honest, where a lot of the intelligence is today, I wouldn't trust it. And I think bringing your human insight to it. But this is a problem that we're solving, or we're trying to solve, and I hope we encourage others to get into this game of really becoming data providers. And I like to say data is a new advocacy. So how we start to drive change, how we start to change perception of people that look like me and us, is by introducing new and authentic signals. To the other point of mitigation, we found through our algorithm build out, we've actually been able to quantify and predict authenticity based on hundreds of thousands of survey panel results, and actually have created an algorithm to help clients and help people understand that. And it's a weighted model that goes into AI to help generate better results.
Fantastic. I love the idea of a systematic way to do this. That's something you hear us talk about a lot. So, John, I want to talk to you a little bit about diverse and representative data sets. And how are, when you're thinking about AI and your solutions, how are we assuring that you have that? We talk a lot about how AI is there, but AI must be fed with great data. So give us your perspective on that.
I think one of the key points that we found, and we launched our model in January, is that there isn't this tremendous wealth of data that's just kind of laying around. So all the models, whether it's Gemini at Google or Meta's model or ChatGPT, have blind spots. We talked to one of the major black universities that has 15 million pages that are unscanned, for instance. So, we've done stuff like licensing New York Amsterdam News. It's the second oldest black newspaper in the United States. That's great. But we have to realize that a lot of our culture and a lot of our history still isn't going to be in any model, much less, Latimer. So there's definite blind spots which will affect, the intelligence or the results that we think are intelligent, whether it's advertising or whether it's your kid trying to do their homework.
Yeah. Amazing. My kids, we can't let him use AI to do his homework. He's trying, though. That's funny. Yeah. I catch him all the time. Like, don't do that. Yeah.
It's coming. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing. To your point on, do you have an example where you really have caught this and been able to either supplement the data set or really use your human insight to really drive to get to the right place of cultural relevance?
Well, I mean, you need a lot of data. So we have, how we're built. It's called a RAG model, meaning we have our own database. And we've populated that again with things like the Amsterdam News, with public domain data, with dissertations. What we're trying to do is populate our database with factual data, as opposed to, one of the problems in the foundation models is that they use things like Reddit comments or YouTube comments, and we've all seen those. So yeah, that is, those are words in a sentence, but they could be hurtful, they could be racist. So, we've tried to keep that out of our data set, although it is baked into the foundation models across the board.
It's great. Thank you. Zekeera, so, when we talk about AI, and in my opinion, is also we're in a people business and we're in a human business. So tell me a little bit about the role human oversight plays in ensuring that AI drives to the right insights in a both accurate way as well as in a culturally sensitive way.
I think humans play a critical role, right? We have to remember that AI is a tool to enhance our work, not necessarily to totally replace it. So the first thing, and I think both John and Larry spoke to this, is really validating the data sources that are being used to train the model. Are they inclusive? Are they representative of diverse audiences, the mindsets, the passion points, the attributes, the group traits, right? And then the second piece is it's important for us to review the output, right? I think we're still nascent in the journey. And so when you look at the output, contextualizing it, does this really mirror real life human experience? A particular cultural group that you're trying to reach, is it accurate?
Yeah, yes. I mean, our business is a human people business, it is, and it's also about, to me, the mix of art and science, and I feel like AI gets us there faster and allows us to have a wider canvas, if you will. So let's move into creating a framework for inclusive data. We touched on it a little bit. Danisha, I'm gonna start with you. What role do partnerships with multicultural research organizations play in enhancing data inclusivity? And you can also open that up to our media partner friends as well, if you'd like.
So partnerships are so important. I think we heard Larry, John, and Zekeera talk about each of their companies and what they do differently. And I think for us, we always talk about, which is an important point, people and having diverse people being behind the scenes working with the data, but oftentimes we don't talk about diverse data representation from a company and partnership perspective. So Zekeera talked about the cultural insights that Collage Group can bring to a brief, can bring to a conversation. But then we can also work with Larry and his team once content is out there to actually, before content even goes out there, right, Larry? We can see if the emotional IQ and the intelligence IQ is actually authentically representing the communities we're trying to reach when we're working with brands. And I think those are the types of things we need to be thinking about when it comes to inclusive frameworks with data. There is no single source of truth. We used to talk about that, right? Or it's first-party data, it's third-party data. No, you need to be sourcing and pulling from multiple methods of data, multiple sources of data to truly understand what's happening in culture in the moment, but also that historical context is so important. We can't lose sight of it, and that is what partners like y'all bring to the table, and we'd love to be having those conversations.
Fantastic. And has to start with a partnership mindset. And so with everyone surrounding on, I think the new thing is it used to be a single source of data. Now it's like a single source of vision or on how we're going to make all of this work together. So John, I want to talk with you about just the key components of an inclusive data collection framework. Where do you start? What are the things that are most valued to you in your approach to that?
If I had to prioritize it, quite honestly, I want data that's either collected or created actually by Black and brown people, ideally. Especially, we're text-based, so we want words. And ideally, I don't want words that are written necessarily about the culture from somebody else's perspective. That's why something like the Amsterdam News is so valuable for us, because it's about our culture by our culture. And I think the same goes true. We use dissertations a lot, so I think that's kind of our focus, at least initially. Whether they're, if we're building a foundation model at some point when you need 1 trillion words, it might be hard to source 1 trillion words of the quality we need, but right now it's fine. So that's the priority.
Pretty amazing. And how do you ensure brands, I love the examples you gave, are really using these methods to make sure that they're getting the right level of inclusivity and representing diverse populations in your framework? The dissertation example is a really good example, but are there others, or are there other things for our brand owners here just watch outs? Because I think this is very difficult, hence why we have an entire panel on it, and this specific point to crack.
It depends what you want to do. I mean, we have data sources up here that are kind of metric driven, as opposed to, and then you kind of delve into those metrics to make your own cultural insights. So statistics and actual consumption behavior, that's kind of straightforward because it is what it is. When you're looking at, hey, we need to, write an essay or, a brief about a brand, or a brief, about a a demographic, then that's a little bit different, because then it is your opinion, kind of, maybe if you use a ChatGPT, kind of mixed with the AI's opinion. And I think people have to be very, very careful. We always ask ChatGPT a general question like, who are our most important artists? And if you ask ChatGPT that, you'll get Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and, this list of European artists. So you really understand, okay, so it's bias, so to speak. So depending, maybe you want that bias in your brief, but you should just be aware that there will be a bias even if it's coming from AI.
Yeah, fantastic. You mentioned insights. So I'm coming to you, Zekeera, on just talking about strategies that can be used to analyze data in a way that uncovers valuable culture insights. This is definitely a human part of the panel.
100%. And I hate to bring it back human-centered, but you definitely want that in-culture expertise or at least experience dealing with culturally centered insights, right? I always tell this story. I went to travel to a client, and one of the insights or the data points are that Hispanics really love their family. The brand person, manager goes, but everybody loves their family, right? And I'm like, sure they do, but in different ways. And that's why the depth of data is so important. When we look at Hispanics, you look at them by country of origin, across levels of acculturation, across where they may live, right? And so what I explain to them is if you have a holiday activation and you go into a Hispanic household, you might see American fare, but you may see fare from their country of origin. You're going to see a multi-generational family, for instance, things of that nature. You're going to see deference to the abuela, right? And so it is that nuance and that cultural specificity that in culture experts bring to the table, or folks that deal with this data day in and day out.
I love that. I would say my favorite is when we have planners that say moms are busy. We're like, yes, they are. That's not an insight, but so my anyway, that's a fact. Okay, but question for you on the balance of broad data set that gives you enough of that breadth to then get to that right level of cultural insight. What's some counsel for this group on that? Because it is, again, art and science and how that works together.
And I think it's the objective you're trying to reach, right? If you're trying to drive growth with diverse segments, we always talk about this idea of cultural fluency, and that's using insights and intelligence to both go effectively and efficiently across the entire market. What we talk about is you have to have that cultural specificity and understand that nuance and even lead with that, and then you can create a halo effect across all of the other segments.
Fantastic.
Can I just chime in there just to like double click on what I think I hear you saying? Sometimes we try to use scale as the out in our industry because we try to say there's not enough data about this cultural segment, or we don't understand, we couldn't find it. And I just want to call BS on that, right? Because it doesn't have to be quantified by millions of pieces of data. If the insight is culturally sound to that community, that's what we need to live with, because that is culturally censored marketing.
100%. And what you'll find is that there are a lot of similarities in these universal insights, but the way that you activate against it is where the understanding of that cultural nuance comes in. Going back to the holiday example, for instance.
Yeah. Yes. Fantastic. And it's a really good point. I feel like we lose that a little bit, and the notion of scale when you're thinking about, can we do this programmatically? And sometimes you're like, I don't know if that's really going to get us to the right subculture or community to be able to really break through. So I love that you said that, Danisha, because I think it's really important, especially in this conversation, thinking about the comparison of diverse data and then also tiny data that helps us find that one thing that can make a big change. So our next topic is a really big one, which is the future of diversity and inclusion and how it also intersects with AI. So that's a big one. So Larry, I'm starting with you here. What do you see as the future in the advertising industry? And you guys are all going to answer this.
I
so
love
get ready.
this question because it brings up a lot of things for me personally as I think about like the journey of where we are from AI, from an AI perspective. The fact that and I guess I'm getting a little personal with this, the fact that so many marketers are kind of at the precipice of saying, okay, let's let AI make that decision before we let a person of color make that decision. And we're starting to get into this place where we're trusting the sort of the out-of-the-box intellect and insights rather than the people that are influencing culture. And I think that what the future of advertising is going to be entrepreneurs, companies that are focused on how can we make better data sets, how do we empower people in the organization to drive that conversation from a development perspective, because we're going to get to a place very quickly where decisioning is going to become dynamic and programmatic, and the way to actually influence the future of advertising is getting involved and making more sort of endpoints into that decisioning tree. And it will become a decisioning tree. We will be in a world where it's not going to be by committee, it will be by decision trees, and people at different points of the decision trees will have influence. So I would say as leaders and as people of color, we need to lean in and understand how these points are derived and find a way to influence it. Get into an advocacy mode where it's now, this is an opportunity where you don't have to be perceived as disruptive, like I was the disruptive guy all the time. Now I can use AI to propel and accelerate solutioning. And I think that's been a big part of how we've not made as much progress as we all wanted to, because the solutioning was just so enormous. Now that technology is moving so much faster, we can leverage that to make change. So I see a future of advertising that's way more diverse, but not because of the people that are running it, because I think that will become a smaller universe. It will be more diverse because the people that are contributing to what the outputs will become bigger. We'll have more voices driving that through data influence.
I love that, and I love the thought of the decision tree that makes you make choices around what is the right amount of impact this decision makes for us.
That's right.
Which I think is a really interesting, again, the systematic way to do that, so that you're around this as a team saying, is this the right thing in the decision tree? And the solution saying that this is a solution, that's the right way to use scale. So I love that. That's fascinating. Danisha, what about you on just a small question, future of diversity and inclusion and AI and what you see in the industry? Go for it. Yeah.
I think there's something to what Larry was saying. I think we have to get into using AI in our everyday lives. Actually, at Digitas, we did a study with Vox. We surveyed creators, people who create professionally. We also surveyed digital contributors. So these are people creating blogs, editorial, and things of that nature. And they all said that they believe that there's one thing AI cannot do, and that is the human element, the human component. People still need to be able to see and feel and hear from voices and regular humans. And so if you can, in your everyday life, have an opportunity to test and learn with these models, I think we will then see more content out there that is better served for our communities, that is done and created by Black and brown folks. We were actually just chatting in the back, and we were like, where's the AI Black think tank? And so John was like, well, there's actually one, and it's done virtually, and you can join. So those are the type of things that I think will get us to a future of advertising that is with us at the center, that doesn't include fear-mongering, that doesn't have us thinking that, things and the robots and all of the such are going to take our jobs. Like, we actually got to get in and use it. And AI can never be a human. So that is the one piece of creativity we can always continue to bring to the work.
Fantastic. Thank you. You're up.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys on that. If we looked at what we see in our data, for instance, is that Gen Z in general, but Black Gen Z particularly, are both most skeptical but also most excited about AI. The creator economy and innovation are things that they're very excited about. And so I think that, to Larry's point, you're going to have more diverse individuals leaning into it and developing the prompt so that you can create economies of scale that are culturally nuanced and specific and authentic and really speak to the people from an advertising perspective.
Fantastic.
That's a great question. As somebody from kind of a science background, when somebody says only people can do that or AI won't be able to do that, that rings a bit of an alarm bell for me. And I think we should be careful when we even think that. We're in the first inning of this kind of AI revolution. And I just got back from seeing some amazing technology, and there's probably nothing out of reach at some point of AI in terms of emulating, let's just call it emulating a person. It's going to be at some point indistinguishable. And right now, let's say if you look at words, right, you're buying $1 million worth of services from a Gemini or OpenAI, gets you a lot of thinking, gets you a lot of intelligence. So I think we have to stay on our toes, look and adopt AI, and certainly use it, because we will need smart people that are creating businesses around it, or insights, or how does AI plug into make a business decision better. But be careful when you're thinking, hey, AI can't do that, or I need a person to do that. We created a piece of software for a healthcare company that created the call center scripts. And they said, oh, that's great. And the next question is, well, AI can actually read the script and respond to the people. So, that's this next stage of AI that we'll be seeing.
John said he disagrees with Danisha, basically.
And what was the reaction when you said that? Like, the next level would be, we can make the script and it also can be the voice, the quote human voice here. What was the conversation? Because I think that's a really interesting space we're getting into. Conversational commerce was the beginning of this, right? But now it's at scale and in all different types of service levels. But I'd love to hear what that conversation looked like for that partner.
I think companies, can get up to that precipice, and but they wonder how that's going to be embraced, or how, if the consumer is even aware that they're talking to an AI, because it's not like the old chat bots where it's you can make that decision definitely. So they're stepping back from that, but the math, if you just look at the math, hey, we have 1,000 people in the call center, or we could have 2 servers. The math is kind of compelling, so I think that's the direction that we'll begin to see.
Amazing. I loved.
As a build to that,
Yeah,
though,
go ahead.
we've seen this transformation in our lifetimes on automation. Like, oh, it takes a human to really retouch a photo and make it feel, I guess I'm super old because I am just
we're all
talking
29. Everyone's 29
yeah,
here.
exactly.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
I remember a time where all these things that were so precious that we thought no machine can do, they started to do. And now it's getting to a place where they're doing it faster and in some cases better. And then it's going to start to really become real life when they're making decisions. That is I think the difference of where, the tipping point of where we are. And that's from my perspective, and why I started my business was I need to make sure that decisioning is well informed, because we've lived throughout all these technical revolutions through bias. It's been one type of person who's been driving Google, who's been driving Adobe. Those guys fit a profile. And this next wave requires us to lean in and create new pathways for understanding and our understanding of how the technology works. We can't become servants to it. We have to tell it what to do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We are just getting started in this next phase. For me, the first thing for the world of Digitas or agency folks is to think about the things that you do every day that are low value actions that it's like a pass fail. You did it or you didn't. And how do we use AI to automate those things? Think of Excel in my world when I was a kid, right? And how do you use that so that you're spending your time differently? So those things have happened now. We've seen it. And so the next thing is the scary space of letting these things make decisions, especially for something like what we're talking about here. And how do you do that in a way that you're, again, so I love your decision tree concept of this is a moment to make a decision. This is it shows up right now in how we think about creative. We can use all the tools to come up with a much broader set of ideas, but then you're making choices on the creative you're making, even though you've used these tools to help you. So I think it's a really interesting space that we're getting into, and this is really the sweet spot of it, is the data that feeds these models and what that looks like. Zekeera, I'm going to come back to you in terms of emerging trends that brands should be aware of when it comes to integrating diversity and inclusion and AI into their strategies. What are some of the things that you're seeing today?
I actually have to think on that question.
Yeah, fine, sure. Well, we'll come back to you. Danisha, same thing, that as well as the long-term benefits. So there's one is the trends. Second is long-term benefits of committing to diversity and inclusion and AI in advertising, both for brands and for society at large.
Yes, I like the society at large question. So I was doing some research, and 90% of the indigenous languages in the United States are on the verge of becoming extinct. And I think it's important because, John, you were talking about your model and how you use oral tradition, which is something that is unique and true for Black and brown folks. How we tell stories and pass them down from generation to generation is important. But if they're on the verge of becoming extinct or disappeared in 5 to 10 years because people don't know the languages or no one passed them down, I never learned Creole, even though my grandmother and great-grandmothers are from Louisiana, right? But if AI can help us learn and understand those languages, we can start to reclaim cultural traditions that have technically been lost to us or that we've never been taught. And so I think that's something when you think about the ecology of things, because if you train people to understand their language, you're healing them, you're healing their memories. There's also this connection to healing memories, healing the land. And so if we can heal memories, heal the land, we can sustain our future. So I'm just thinking about AI, bigger term, visionary standpoint. Teaching language is so important, and that's why I love what John is doing. And how do we give everyone access to learn those languages that might be becoming extinct, which could then have a huge impact on our people and our land.
Whew, I have to wow. Yes, please.
Just that.
Just that.
Thank you.
So, are you ready for you? Any more emerging trends come to mind?
Because I don't know if they're like aha trends,
Okay,
right? They
yeah,
are just
lay it on us.
things
I
that
wanna hear 'em.
You
Yes,
know,
yeah.
So in leveraging in the brands that we work with is leveraging AI just to develop things like creative briefs or concepts, messages, things of that nature. So it's nothing that is like provocative, but that's what it's being used for currently that we're
Yeah.
seeing. Yeah.
Are you seeing? I'll offer. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I see trends. I see trends in our business, and I see trends in the fact that people are bringing their own bias to the AI, and it's manifesting itself more and more, and in the ways of how they're asking questions of AI and how those responses are getting sort of pulled into the ecosystem. And oftentimes people are coming to this with the right intentions, but they're using their own bias to actually push the lever, if you will. And it's not, the trend that I'm seeing is not towards a negative bias, it's to this super extreme version of what they perceive as inclusion, and they see it as representation, and it becomes tokenism, it becomes very, very biased, but the intentionality and the bias and how someone's actually activating and bringing to life these AI requests are sort of perpetuating a backlash, like a movement the other way. So we're getting this crazy pendulum swinging happening where I think the user has to also be, we talk a lot about systems in the decision tree, but the user also has to be sort of remodeled, sort of retrained, sort of open the aperture of how they are asking questions of the world. And we've seen this again in the times of how technology has shifted, memes, everything, we watched all this sort of things that seem perceived as innocent then become spirally out of control in a negative way. And I think that's a trend that I'm actually seeing now more and more is asking a very biased question of the data and sort of getting reinforcers or driving a very extreme point of view.
When this happens, if this is a client or someone you're working with, how do you handle it? Because to me, one of the trends in Zekeera, to your point on creative briefs, et cetera, one of the things we're seeing is clients want to do this, right? They want to create a system, but then they don't have a way to integrate that into ways of working and sort of deal with what happens, right? We're doing new things. So using your example, what has happened when you've seen this behavior, and have you been able to shape it and change it? Because most likely, the person doesn't get what they're doing, right, but the long-term impact is real here. So I'd love to hear more about that.
This gets to the whole reason I started my business, because to be honest, and I hate saying this, but I say it often, I was the black guy that got asked the question, what do you think of this ad? What is happening? Larry, speak for everyone. And even when I give my own point of view on it, it's well, it was this,
Daddy's been there.
Yeah. You're not the target. So much of that.
That's
and so
terrible.
I think creating, really what has been influential in these conversations is objectivity from a data perspective. And that's why we went the metrics route, because the metrics people believe a little bit faster than they believe someone's sort of narrative story, their experience. So that's why we went through this whole exercise of how can we quantify elements of human experience that drive content perception and then action. And so that's how we've gotten around it. And I think more and more as we move from a brand marketer perspective deeper into this performance mindset, metrics become way, way more important. And so having the right types of KPIs, shifting conversations from old school KPIs to what is actually moving the needle is the way that I've been able to successfully navigate those conversations. But throughout my 3 decades of marketing stuff, it's been dicey until we've now had the instruments in order to have an objective conversation about this.
You know what's interesting? I think that whenever you introduce the human element, like we all have our own biases. And so I think what's really important about what you said is the objective data, right? But with the prompting, with us having our biases, and some people actually don't even realize that they are being biased. It's like a question is like, how do you solve for that, right? It's interesting.
And it's just, it really comes down to, for us, is like, to John's point earlier, the words and context matter. And so even evaluating some prompts and evaluating the question, that's, when we were developing our models, we actually had to push back on our researchers, push back on how they were creating the questions, because it's like, well, that doesn't make sense to me, you know. And these are like PhDs and like real like smart people, but their lived experience didn't allow them to understand how those words in this context would land. And so I think it's, again, how are you creating those signals at that very nascent stage? Because it's all downstream. Like, I'm thinking about OpenAI licensing News Corp as a data source. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what? where are we going with this? So I think it's really, it's not like boiling the ocean, but if you have like a point of view and you can quantify that in a data set, put it out there. Become like the driver of that. It doesn't mean like we have to become huge data centers, but like little things start to matter over time and starts to move the pendulum to a place where we really want it.
If I could just jump in, one quick point that when you use the word objective, again, you know, these machines really aren't, they're subjective because they're kind of trained with incomplete data. So, you know, just if you just want to look at data, you say, well, we've known that black women have, you know, disparate outcomes when they have children. And we've known that for decades. So it's beyond even any kind of argument, but that data, although it's objective, hasn't really done anything. And I think that's one of the reasons, and you know, I am a for-profit company, but one of the things that we also have to keep in mind that these giant companies, really there's 5 companies that have created the giant AI that we're using, are for-profit companies. So if everything that the machine ultimately wants to do is make its parent more money, well, that's a particular, you know, that frames all the data and all the things and all the functionality in a certain direction that may or may not be to every human's benefit, especially people of color.
How do we not let that happen? I'm scared now. I mean, I understand it, but when you
Black
say
AI
it in the way you've just said that, it is a scary future when you think about the power of just 5, or you know, there's only there's only a few that are trying to compete here, and we know what happens. We've seen, you know, this world. So I'm just curious, anyone that's here, like that's the whole point of this is, what do we do when we see that? Is it about training prompts to be able to ask the right questions because you don't know it's biased? Like, but I'd love to, that we're on our last comment here, the lady's waving, but like, I would love to hear that because I think that's why we're talking about this
I think
today.
the no duh for
now.
me
Yeah.
and how what we see in our data, and all of us know this, we see like a very high correlation to how people make decisions, to how they feel sort of connected and belonging and seen in content. So like in responses. So it actually does better business, to be honest, to be inclusive, to be diverse, to do so to John's point, the machine only knows what it's taught, but the people that historically built these things had their own point of view of how you get to success. And that's fundamentally created this foundational, like, sort of weird dynamic where it's like, well, being more inclusive means what, you know, like, what does that mean? It's actually better for your business to be more inclusive.
Right.
And the data has just not been developed in that way because there is a single-minded point of view that was driving that data creation.
Yeah, my answer is really quick. Larry has a company, Latimer AI, Collage Group. We have XStereotype. We need to be investing in these companies and these businesses. It's real simple. There will always be Googles and Metas of the world, but until we continue to invest in our own, which is exactly what this week is about, right? Like, we're going to keep combating that issue and having the same conversation. So next year, we want to be having a different conversation around how we are leading in the conversation of DE&AI.
Yes, thank you. All right. Any parting thoughts, you guys?
Well, just one last thought, right? I also think that regardless of the bias that are put into the prompts, when you're talking about advertising, you're talking about resonating with people. 100% of population growth is being driven by who? Diverse segments, right? And if you get and the importance of seeing yourself, we see that year over year increasing since 2020. So if you see something that doesn't feel right in your spirit, the brand is going to experience backlash. And so I think it combats some of that bias in terms of how it shows up in concept and messaging, because the marketplace will get you together.
I agree 100%.
I agree.
All right. Okay. Woo! Thank you. Awesome panel. Thank you. Really wonderful conversation. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of the week.